Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, October 7th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the state of Arizona, the state of Colorado, Michigan, New York, and so many other states that have released additional plans as to how they want to draw their congressional districts for the 2022 midterm elections. Now, what we are looking at in the state of Arizona specifically is our first ever released draft from the Arizona Independent Commission, and I think that this perfectly encompasses what sort of swing states might end up being if they were able to follow a standard procedure where they showed and accurately represented their citizens in terms of the competitive nature of certain districts. Now, the state of Arizona right now has a total of, I believe, 9 districts with 11 electoral votes. As we are looking at the 2022 proposed map, this brand new one, we also have 9 districts because Arizona actually was largely expected to gain an electoral vote but did not end up gaining one by the end of the 2020 census. But you can see here that in this new map, this is one of the few states in which we actually see a true bipartisan commission take a look at the demographic breakdowns and draw districts within the fairness and within the, equal representation across the state. You can see that in the old map, there was a few competitive districts. Primarily speaking, these districts were Democratic. They had 5 Democratic representatives and 4 Republican representatives. In this new proposed map, what it would essentially do is have 2 safe districts. What would it also do is move 2 incumbents against each other in the second district. I'm sure one of them would end up deciding to run in the open district, or the one that would be left out just because it's drawing out a congressional member. We will see what happens. The second district likely isn't going to get too crowded, mainly because people rarely ever want to run against another incumbent as an incumbent. It rarely ever happens. It does happen sometimes, primarily when states lose electoral votes, but that doesn't seem to be the case in our state, in the state of Arizona. But, looking at the map here, we have pretty much nearly the same type of partisan breakdown. The only real thing is that the Republicans lose a Republican-leaning seat, and that sort of makes sense. At the start of 2010, the Republican Party had a much higher advantage in the state of Arizona, and this new proposed map is essentially putting it out back to a more competitive point. The Republicans have 3 safe districts. The Democratic Party would only have 1, which is a question of concern here, but the Democrats do have 2 leaning districts, the 8th district and the 6th district. But this would, technically speaking, put the Republican Party in an opportunity, if they were to win in a wave, to win 8 out of the 9 districts, assuming everything would go in their favor. This actually opens up an additional highly competitive seat here. So on the old map, the Republican Party had the advantage. That came from a number of congressional districts. It just so happened that Democrats were able to represent them. Well, now we're looking at 2022, and it seems as if things might be a little bit more different, and it would be a little bit more difficult for Democrats to win in some of these other areas if they weren't going to be popular in the first place. So you can see that the districts here in the 1st and the 7th and the 6th, that these are more competitive districts. The only safe one for the Democrats is the 3rd district. So I'm not entirely sure if this would be super happy or super beneficial for the Democratic Party, but at the end of the day, it does pretty much encompass the competitive nature of the state of Arizona. Another state I wanted to take a look at is the state of Georgia. Now, I briefly mentioned this when we talked about my older discussion of the redistricting process, but this is exactly where we are starting to see some major divides across our states here. Arizona and Georgia were very similar in the 2020 election, in the means that they had switched over into support of the Democratic Party, voting for Joe Biden. He was the first Democrat to win there since 1992 in Georgia and 1996 in the state of Arizona. But there are big differences between the ways that Arizona and Georgia conduct their redistricting process. The Republican Party has entire and complete control over the state of Georgia for 2022, meaning that they are going to be able to draw whatever lines they would want to, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're shoring up one of these Democrats in the 6th district. This is the district in which Lucy McBath currently holds, where she won this race back in 2018. 2 Democrats represent the 6th district and the 7th district, but when you take a look at this new proposed map, only one of the districts remains, at least for the Democratic Party. That 6th district goes back to being a partisan lean of Republican plus 16. They also make the 2nd district nearly as competitive, actually much more competitive than where it was before. They are trying to make it so the GOP could win this 2nd district and cut out the amount of Democrats in the state. Republicans gain a Republican-leaning seat, and 1 highly competitive seat is reduced. Now there are 2 highly competitive seats, and that leaves just 4 seats for the Democrats, and the Republicans currently have a total of 8. Again, they are doing this intentionally because they know that the state of Georgia is turning, but they are ensuring through these redistricting processes that the Democrats can't win in any of these districts outside of the Atlanta metro area, and potentially Georgia's 2nd congressional district, which is now a Democrat plus 1 partisan lean. Another state that I thought was a point of interest was the state of Ohio, in which you can actually see in the old map, Democrats don't really have much luck. They currently hold, in the old map, 3 safe seats, and there is one highly competitive district in which Tim Ryan holds. He is the last Democrat to hold this state. Now, if you take a look at the amount of Republicans, you have 4 Republican-leaning seats, and then you have an additional 8 Republican safe seats. The state of Ohio is gerrymandered in such a way that Democrats can win the popular vote across the state, but only win 4 out of the 16 districts across the state. I mean, it is a very large gerrymander. This new proposed map, what would it do? It would reduce 4 Republican-leaning seats, add 1 Democratic-leaning seat, and add 2 highly competitive seats. But the problem is, this is not proposed by the Republican Party. This is proposed by the Democratic Party, and Republicans have complete control over what goes on in this state. And of course, they can always look at the Democratic plan, but they would never, ever pass it. The same way the state of Arkansas likely looked at that 1 or 2 plans by the Democratic Party and did not even consider passing such a plan. This was the final map in the state of Arkansas. This has been passed by the state Senate, and all it has to do is go to Governor Asa Hutchinson, and he is likely to sign this because it makes sense. In fact, it takes what used to be a competitive district in the second and makes it all of a sudden safe. Shifting at 3 points can certainly mean a lot when Democrats are never at the advantage in that second district. But when you take a look at the way that many of these districts are drawn, there isn't much of a difference between then versus now. So it made sense to sort of stick with this map. But like I said, the Republican Party likely looked at this one plan by the Democratic Party, in which the Democratic Party arguably did try to make it so they would have a congressional district to represent. They took Little Rock, which is the most populous state, the capital of Arkansas, and they took it because they knew it's a Democratic stronghold, and they tried to make it add into the second district, currently held by French Hill, or would be held by French Hill, because the second district actually still held by French Hill. I believe he might be in that area there. But the point being that the Democratic Party certainly tried to make it so all the other districts would be considered safe, and then this second district would be Democrat plus 3, and Democrats would be able to have some type of representation from the state of Arkansas. But unfortunately for the Democratic Party, the Republican Party said absolutely not and stuck with this 4 map for the GOP, and it also made that second district much more solid in terms of the way that the demographics work, in terms of the way that the district itself works. Of course, the partisan lean doesn't adjust much, but we will see the actual implications of this in 2022 when the margin is exceptionally higher than it was back in the 2020 election. So going back to the national overview, 538 also added in this amazing tool where we can look at the states with proposed maps. I understand it's just a color characterization, but it gives us a sense of direction as to which states are going to be going in the right way. I also am very surprised to see that some of these states have very late deadlines, and I question whether or not they are going to be using this newly drawn map for the 2022 midterms. For instance, the state of Florida, the deadline there is June 13th, 2022. Now, they don't have to take up all the time to the deadline, but assuming that they do, how could you feasibly enact this in time for the 2022 midterm elections? I'm not sure if the state of Florida has decided to stick with their older map. I'm sure that would be much bigger news than what I'm hearing so far, because I'm not hearing anything about that. I'm sure that would be something that would set a precedent that would sort of just jumble up our congressional redistricting process. But the point is that some of these states have some pretty late deadlines, so unfortunately we might not be getting too many redistricting updates for the foreseeable future, unless, we will be for the next 2-3 months. But beyond that, some states probably will be holding out till summertime, and then it'll be a little bit more relevant to be talking about them there. But you can see that many states actually have multiple pieces of legislation or multiple drafts of these new maps. For instance, the state of West Virginia has 25 maps proposed, and all of them, and I kid you not, every single one of them, ends up with the Republicans in the advantage. Why? Well, the state of West Virginia is changing. They are losing an electoral vote. So both Democrats and Republicans are putting forth plans in order to make this type of characterization, trying to make sure that their map goes through. And it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's not going to impact anything. As you can see, the partisan breakdown does not change whatsoever, but it is just very interesting that we are looking at the state of West Virginia have so many maps when it really doesn't need to. Ohio only has 1. New York currently has 2. We've covered Maryland's 2 maps. We've covered New York's 2 maps. Michigan has 15. And I think this is also something that is very interesting. The state of Michigan has an independent redistricting commission, and the Republican Party almost always comes out in the advantage, even though the state itself doesn't lean towards the Republican Party. I think this is largely due to the fact that that commission might not necessarily be tapping into the right amount of, willingness to draw the maps fairly. But again, that is not my call to make. There, of course, are a lot of things to take a look at in Michigan, and it'd probably be very difficult to try to make so many Democratic districts when you'd have to be peeling directly from areas such as Detroit and Ann Arbor, and that itself would be a gerrymander if you were to bring that out into the rural areas across eastern Michigan. But we will see what happens. There are 15 maps, way more likely will be proposed, and we will see if they end up being approved by that independent commission and what the backlash will be from the governor and the state legislature for those maps. In addition, the state of Iowa, we just saw this map here rejected by the state Senate. They said absolutely not. The reason why, I think, is because this older map made it so 3 of the districts here, all of which had a Republican lean, which means that Republicans in a very good map would be able to hold all 4 districts across the state of Iowa. This proposed map, and you can see who it was proposed by, the Iowa Legislative Services Agency, one safe Democratic district, essentially Democrat plus 7, not safe, but pretty solid, then Republican plus 2, and Iowa's third, so Democrats could feasibly have 2. They already have this 3rd district, so why wouldn't they have the first one in this new map? And then the 2nd district could potentially go to a Democrat. The 4th district really isn't going to change. But the point is that the Republican Party in Iowa has complete control over how that process works, and they rejected that map for a reason. They knew that it was something that would benefit the Democratic Party, and they absolutely shut it down. The state of Montana is also very interesting. They now have a number of proposals up in this state, and we don't really need to see a final map. It says here until November 14th, so there's a bit of time, but you can see that they are going through multiple proposals until they are figuring out what works right. The most recent one is this 9th proposal, in which the 1st district would have a partisan lead of 5, and the 2nd district would have a partisan lean of 35. If you want to take a look at the state of Montana again, the 8th proposal was one that was beneficial for the Democrats. Democrats would be in a much better position in the 1st district. It's a Republican plus 3, and then Montana's 2nd would be Republican plus 37. It seems that that 1st district is going to be the one that is heavily targeted by the Democratic Party, and that is the one in which Matt Rosendale will likely be running in, just because he is the at-large representative. But again, it really just depends on where he lives, and that really probably won't matter, and also his sort of political understanding of the environment. So Arizona we covered, Texas we have covered before, we don't really need to go over it again. I mean, there seems to be some maps here. There's a proposed map by a Republican state senator. Again, these maps really aren't changing much versus, the old map versus the new map, besides making it so Democrats can't win a number of these districts, can't make them competitive anymore because of the way they have been gerrymandered. I believe we've covered the state of Washington. I don't know how much we've looked into the state of, Hawaii, but the state of New Mexico, we actually also have an independent redistricting commission, and you can see that these maps are going through a whole lot of concepts. Now, I would say the most beneficial one for the Republican Party is probably either Concept G or Concept D, but the most recent one, Concept H, would put the Democratic Party in a favorable position. It would make the 1st district D plus 7, this 3rd district D plus 11, and the 2nd district D plus 1. But the concern here is that it is very possible that because they don't have a safe district, that if there was some type of wave year for the GOP, that they could win all 3 seats, and that's possible for the next 10 years. So there are some pros and cons for the Democratic Party in some of these maps. In most cases, cons, more than anything. I think that they would be more unhappy with most of these districts that have been proposed. But the point is that sometimes they are seemingly in the benefit, but could end up being harmed later down the line. And I think that the Republican Party also recognizes that, because with risk, there is always that possibility. You are looking at the Democratic Party try to draw districts in a way where, yes, they're siphoning off some of their votes, and thus the safe district is no longer safe. They're counting on these incumbents to win. They're counting on the Democratic Party's presence in a number of districts, and while it may be something to rely on in normal years, 2022 is still very uncertain. And I think that the next decade is very uncertain. So many things can change and probably will change, and it is very important to point out, if things end up changing, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party could be very unhappy with the way that they make certain moves for 2022. So districts that might be considered to be safe now will not be safe by the end of the decade. The same way Georgia's 6th district, which I just showed you as being shored up for the Republican Party to end up winning there, used to be safe at the beginning of the decade and now is a Democratic district. So it is very possible for things like that to happen. So we're starting to see these states fill in. It's really exciting as more and more maps get confirmed. Arkansas is yet to be confirmed, but will likely be confirmed sometime in the near future. West Virginia will also likely be confirmed sometime in the near future. There seems to be a pretty good understanding of which party is going to control these districts by the end of it. I mean, it's a very Republican state. No way you could draw a Democratic district. Looking at Ohio, I think that the Republican Party is definitely going to reject this new plan. They are going to propose their own. The deadline here is September 30th, 2021. So actually, they should have already, I guess, passed one of these new bills. But I guess they have deadline for the legislature to pass temporary map if commission doesn't succeed. So it looks like we're going to end up going back there. So all around here, what we're seeing in our redistricting process is that more and more states are starting to add in districts, add in their own congressional maps, and it's really exciting. We will be along here for the journey. We are going to cover it every time a new map gets proposed, or not proposed, every time new maps get confirmed, probably in groups of 2, 3, 4, just because I won't be spamming your feed with Idaho updates, Montana updates, Iowa updates, but sometimes if it's very notable, I will make an individual video because there are some implications. Every single seat matters at this point. Democrats really only have a 5-seat majority over the GOP, so every single seat matters at this point in time, and they need to ensure that they make that known. In addition, these districts are going to be extremely competitive in 2022, and we will see what happens by the end of this redistricting process, because it truly can tell us who will win control of the House in 2022 without a doubt, or potentially it might be a little bit more ambiguous by the end of this all. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.